Are you looking to refine your sales team and increase your company's revenue? Leading your sales team is an ongoing improvement process. Join Harry Newhan from Eric Lofholm International as he interviews top sales managers in the world. Discover the best practices that rocket them and their teams towards success. Boost your recruitment, motivation, and training techniques, leading you to build a top-producing, synergetic sales team. Welcome to CSI for Sales Managers.
And we are back. Harry Newhan here with continuous sales improvement for sales managers and best practices. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I've got a great guest today. He's with me all the way from Cincinnati, Dave Moravec, and it is with the Coleraine Chamber of Commerce down in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. We're excited to have Dave here because not only does he have experience in sales management, but now he's in the other side of it where he's pulling sales managers and companies and corporations, pulling them together for the Chamber of Commerce. And what better way to get some insights on some sales management tactics and strategies and, of course, best practices. So we're going to have Dave, actually our audience will welcome Dave into our show today. And again, we're the continuous sales improvement for sales managers. So Dave, how are you today?
I am terrific. Blue skies and sunshine here in Cincinnati. Got a doubleheader this evening playing softball.
That's great. That's exciting. We finally got some sunshine here too. We've had a string of wet weather coming our way over the last 10 days, and finally we got some drying out to do. So it's exciting. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
Dave.
glad to be here.
You want to tell a little bit of background on yourself? I kind of touched on it a little bit, but take a minute and tell everybody who you are, and if you want to share any of your personal family, man, kids. You said softball. Is it you or is it kids? What's going on?
No, actually, I play on 4 different teams here in the Cincinnati area, 2 softball teams and 2 fast pitch baseball teams. It's my passion. I caught a full game yesterday behind the plate, full gear and everything, and then took off the equipment, changed into a pair of shorts and a different uniform, played in the finals of our softball tournament that had gone on Saturday. I played 3 games on Saturday. So tonight I'm pitching with a competitive group of 20 and 30-year-olds, and it's a great time. I'm going to be married in a couple weeks here in Cincinnati. She and I have 5 kids between us scattered across the country, and relocated to Cincinnati from Illinois after living in Illinois my entire life. She and I met online, and we're looking for a change in geography. So we were looking to move a little bit further south and found Cincinnati to be a great home. My background is entrepreneurial. I've been owner and president leading organizations since, the mid-'80s. My first managing experience was 1986 as national sales manager of a small printing company, and have managed teams and managed people since that time. So 35 years.
Wow, that's awesome. You know, first of all, congratulations on your upcoming wedding. That is fantastic. Way to go. I'm sure it'll be a blessing. And the softball and fastball, I've heard that was not easy because of the pace of the game, pace of the pitching.
Yeah.
So for you to be catching on one and then pitching on the other, that's got a lot of talent back in there.
I made a key error yesterday in right field. They put me out in right field, and the ball was tailing away from me, and I missed the ball totally. Caught the tip of my glove, and it cost us a couple runs. But it's all in fun. It's a church league. We had won 2 out of 3 games on Saturday. Got into the winners bracket, and obviously didn't finish in the top, but we had a good time. And the team I play on tonight is a competitive 20s and 30-year-olds. And for being 59, going to be 59 in a couple weeks, I still can keep up with the kids.
Good for you. Congratulations. That is so exciting. Baseball is my passion. I told several people, I said, if you had a chance to do it all over again, what would you do? I said, play baseball.
Absolutely.
Play baseball. I played softball until my mid-20s, and then my life just transitioned into tunnel vision business, and I walked away from the game. And it wasn't easy, but it was just something that I needed to do at the time.
So. Well, there's a number of people that come back to play. The team that I play on, that I caught for yesterday, there's several guys that are in their mid to late 50s, early 60s, and have just come back to the game in the last few years. because they had the time and because there is an avenue to play. So maybe you can find someplace in your area to play.
That's great. I'll have to have that. I'll have to find that league that is just designed for people with hip replacements. So that way I don't have to be worried about how fast I run.
There you go.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into our interview here.
Sure.
I appreciate you sharing a little background with us. It's nice for our audience. They can relate with people that they know a little bit about. So thanks for sharing those points here. So for sales managers, what do you feel is one of the most key or most important parts of sales management?
Yeah, I think as I think about the differences of sales management in a B2B versus a B2C environment, I think those things need to be taken into consideration. Many times the sales manager in those environments has to consider who the end user is and the type of salesperson that's going to be effective in that space. Every business is a little bit different from their product, their sales process, or today's buzzword buyer experience. And if you're in a B2B space, it's much different than the B2C space. And I have friends in both areas. And most of my career, in fact, almost all of my career was in the B2B space, calling on either SMBs or larger Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies. Also, too, I think that have to take into consideration the size of the organization. There's a difference between a large corporate environment with hundreds, if not thousands, of salespeople across a large geography versus maybe a small sales team in a geography like Cincinnati that has crossover from street to street or town to town. Relationships are built, and I think that's important for the sales manager to be thinking about, because the relationship building that can take place in a smaller geography or in a smaller business is different than if you're managing a large multinational or regional sales team. And I think the last thing that's important, at least for me, is the importance of being in lockstep with your marketing. If the sales team and or sales leadership is not in lockstep with the marketing leadership, there's often a disconnect. There's often a rub, a challenge that has to be navigated, and you want it to be as smooth as possible for both concerns. If the marketing team is driving the audience and the air cover, so to speak, and the sales team or sales leadership is not on board with that process, you can imagine what that looks like.
Yeah, that could be a major conflict. But back for the first thing you said, I think you're the first guest that I've had that talked about the distinction of business to business or business to customer. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's a distinction that, again, we haven't heard before. And I guess that would determine the kind of salespeople that you have, the training that you have, the marketing that you have. It's a totally different idea.
Absolutely. And we've come to realize, I think, today that so many of decision makers are doing the research ahead of actually getting engaged with a sales team. There's so much available on the internet through your web marketing tools and social media and Yelp. You can't go to a restaurant today without checking the at least top 10 or last 10 reviews for that restaurant. Same thing holds true in business today. If you're not looking at their LinkedIn page to see what their leadership is all about, the social engagement they have with the community and what they're giving back, I'm surprised that an organization would just pull a number out of the phone directory and say, hey, could you provide me X, Y, or Z? They're doing the research ahead of time. And so the thing I talk about most often, Harry, and I think you'll probably agree with this, is that it's still human to human, H to H, whether it's B2B or B2C. It's still human to human interaction that takes place.
It is. And I'm glad you clarified that, because you're right. A lot of people they miss the point that we're in the relationship business.
Absolutely.
It's sales equals service. We're not trying to pull one over on somebody. We're looking for long-term relationships. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So let's kind of spin it over to a little bit on training, and you can pick one or the other, or if you think it's pertinent for both, as far as B2B or B2C. What do you feel your best training idea, either when you were managing yourself or now that you're working with companies of all different sizes? What do you think your best training idea would be?
You know what? I think that mentorship is so important. I think that many companies miss out on the one-to-one interaction or connecting two sales individuals that have a common connection. They're both trying to sell the same product or solution service to potentially a different client base, maybe with different approaches, but having a mentor coming in, I think is something that's really important and oftentimes missed. Often the salesperson is given a territory, they're given a CRM to work with, they've got a list of prospects. Oftentimes they're being retooled from one of their competitors, and they just have this assumption that they're going to go out and be successful. And I think that that's a bad assumption.
Yeah, it's amazing how often our interpretation of what it's going to be is totally different than the reality of what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does matter whether or not the salesperson that is being brought on has experience in that industry or with that potential customer base versus somebody who's coming out of school. If you're graduating with a marketing and or sales degree, and this is your first sales experience, you've had no internship or any exposure to direct sales, especially in a B2B environment, maybe you canvassed for a direct marketing company, or maybe is sold in a furniture store over the summer, to get some experience. But if you're coming in with little or no experience, having the side-by-side interaction, riding with or making calls with somebody who's been there and done that for an extended period of time can be invaluable.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because so often people are thrown to the wolves, so to speak, and go figure it out, instead of being trained properly and so forth. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It's one of the things that we excel at as a training company, and we have a division that deals with the salespeople. But of course, this platform here is for sales managers, and I'm glad you brought that up, because some sales managers may realize that that's a gap they could fill by taking that new person or taking that salesperson and actually getting dirty with them, getting their hands dirty with them, and showing them more hands-on. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I like the word player coach. It's a baseball term. You take a Frank Robinson, you take a Lou Boudreau. They were respected because they could actually do the work in addition to managing the team. And I found myself in most of the companies that I've been a part of have been smaller organizations, sales teams of 5 to 10 individuals, and having that camaraderie and having that being able to recognize that all of us within the team and or the team leadership can actually go out and close a sale or prospect, do the cold calling that's necessary to build those relationships. And there's some more respect that's built along the way.
Yeah, kind of like, don't just do what I say, do what I do, right?
Yeah, I have. There's a person I know back in Illinois who was hired into a central Illinois tertiary territory, very small marketplace. And the company was based in Chicago, and they devoted all their resources to sales management in the Chicagoland area. They'll just figure it out. Well, they did, but that's just not the right way to do it.
No, the school of hard knocks can get really painful and not as easy and expensive, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go and spin it over a little bit to the next one that kind of almost ties into what you're talking about. What do you feel your best either hiring, recruiting, or interviewing advice would be for sales managers to make sure that they get the person that can do the work that they're looking for?
Yeah, I think that a couple things come to mind. First off is that the evaluation of that salesperson oftentimes follows the same rules that you've always followed. And I've been one to go outside the box when it comes to evaluation of salespeople. So as an example, providing for testing, you and your organization may provide testing for an individual that may test out of the capabilities for sales. They may have been a salesperson for 10 years, but not have the sales acumen associated with that. And you might catch that. And so just relying upon a referral or reference today just isn't enough. A couple of other things that come to mind, having an outside party to evaluate during that interview process is really important, because you're oftentimes short-sighted. You've looked at the resume, you've looked at their background, you may have talked to their references who may or may, probably are good friends or good customers that are referring them. And they're not going to, just like a business referral, you're not going to give them a bad one to call, right?
Right.
So it's important to have somebody else dig a little bit deeper and get further involved. I always recommend the other team members within the organization to interview further into the sales team. So bring in your customer service manager, bring in your operations manager, bring in some frontline people that would say, yeah, I could see this person being a good fit into our organization. The last thing that I'd recommend doing is digging deeper into their LinkedIn profile, because the recommendations portion of that, if you go back further, somebody may have given a recommendation on that individual 3 or 5 years ago, and you might be able to use them as a reference within LinkedIn when the individual who's looking to be hired would not necessarily have chosen that individual based on, it's kind of like looking at those reviews that we were talking about earlier. Being able to look at their profile a little bit deeper might give you some additional insight.
It's amazing what social media has allowed us to do nowadays as far as streamlining so many different aspects of our business.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. And there's a nice little twist there that you mentioned, bringing in other leaders of other divisions to see if there's a fit. And that's another good distinction that I haven't heard yet, Dave, that I think is got some value to it, because they're going to be working with them at some capacity.
Absolutely.
And if they can't get along with them in an interview, how are they going to get along with them in a working capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing, this is something maybe outside the box thinking, but that I've done on a number of occasions, is had a potential salesperson ride with or make sales calls with one of my salespeople or with myself, to see how they'll interact with the customer, whether or not they'll sit back and just simply listen, or whether they're going to jump in and think they know it all in the sales process. Even if it's just a 20-minute car ride to and from the customer's office, you're going to learn some more about their family background. You're going to have some chit chat, and something worthy of note. And this again is not something that is rocket science. It's actually pretty simple. You'll probably have them disqualify themselves and say, gosh, this really isn't a fit for me. If I'm going to be doing this, oh gosh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. And all of a sudden they'll disqualify themselves and save yourself 3 months or 6 months or a year of invested time with that individual who isn't ultimately going to be happy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What we found in our history of our training is that the most expensive part of bringing somebody on is that first 3 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
And you're right. If they weed themselves out, you've saved a ton of money, a ton of energy, and especially from your top people that are generally involved in the training of that person anyway. So excellent thought there. Appreciate that. That reminds me of that movie Ride Along, and come on, let's show you what we're doing here. So let's kind of spin over to another question here. As far as a successful motivating idea, what do you find, or what have you found was a great motivational thought or distinction for your people that you've used it successfully?
Yeah, I think that as I think about that question, Harry, I think about the individuality of that specific question, because to motivate a baseball team or to motivate a team of people going in the same direction, you have to understand what their motivation is. Even yesterday, on the ball field, my job was to catch the pitcher, call the game, and each inning that we came off the field and we had done a good job getting 3 up, 3 down. The coach is saying, "Hey, great job, Dave. Good calling behind the plate. I threw a runner out at third base." Well, he knows what my motivation is to throw another runner out at second base. And he encouraged me that particular way. I think that with sales teams, often we forget that each individual has a motivation that's different. And so you have to get to know the individual and the team. You can't just corporately say, we're going to put this sales contest out there and assume that it's going to motivate the entire team. It may not. It may demotivate some people because they just don't like those kinds of games. They may be more pat on the back or carrot stick individuals, and you may have to whack them around a time or two in order to get the motivation that you want. So I think that overall, my conclusion from a sales management perspective is that each individual on your team plays a different role and needs to be motivated a different way.
So know your people.
Oh, absolutely.
Know your people and know what their why is, know what their driving is. That's good. I like that.
And helping them to understand your why, because if they don't understand why you're either carrot or sticking them to get that result, then what's their motivation to help you. Zig Ziglar said that you're going to get what you want if you help enough other people get what they want. But the reverse is true too. If they understand your motivation for success, and again, maybe this goes back to the recruiting portion of it. So many managers in general, not just sales managers, but managers in general, hire below their skill level because they want to be the smartest person in the room. My suggestion is always to hire somebody who wants your job. And if they understand your job and your motivation is to step up yourself within the organization, and they understand that, then they see a vertical movement capability that some small organizations struggle with the glass ceiling. And where am I going to go? Well, if you want my job, have at it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of companies where they have somebody that their ego gets in the way, and they don't have that philosophy. And I've been blessed. I always have had that. I want you to be good enough to take my job, and that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. Help them understand your why. I think that's really good. Perfect. So let's go to accountability strategies or ideas to because you mentioned motivation. You've got money motivates some people, recognition motivates more people. Yeah. Familial belongingness is probably the number one on the list. People want to feel like they belong and they're a part of something bigger than themselves. But what do you feel to keep people accountable for their activity, their production, their results? Yeah. What do you think is one of your best ideas?
I think the word balance is what comes to mind. I think that so many managers want to be micromanagers. They want to know every single detail of every single deal, and their job is to motivate the entire team. They can't do that from the micromanagement standpoint. But like I'd mentioned earlier, there are also sales managers that are totally hands off. That when you get to the end of the process, you go, "You're fired." You go, "What the heck? You didn't come work with me. You didn't give me the tools that I need. You didn't encourage me along the way." And they're so totally hands off. I believe there has to be a balance in there. Yes, I've been friends, and I have many of my sales staff over the years in different places that I would consider strong friends or business friends because I built that personal relationship with them. But I also would be the one who gave them the hard challenges that gave them the pep talks that they needed, that gave them the motivation that they needed. But there has to be a balance associated with it, because if you're on one end of the spectrum or the other, you're probably not going to succeed. You're probably going to demoralize that individual by demanding that information. I always said that if you gave the salesperson enough rope to lasso the moon or to hang themselves, then you were doing your job. So that's one way to look at it.
No, I like it. I like balance. I think that's really important, because you're right. Some people swing the pendulum so far one way or the other way, and they're wondering why the results aren't there, and there's no tracking or accountability mechanism in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about something, maybe a setback. What do you feel you'd like to share with our audience? Because we're all adults in the room here. We know nothing goes straight up, and nothing's just a bed of roses. There's going to be setbacks. If you'd like to share, what's one setback that you've had in your career, either as a worker or as one of the owners, the companies that you owned.
Sure.
And what did you learn from it?
Oh my gosh, I could tell stories all afternoon, Harry, because
just pick one. Just pick one.
I think one of the things that, and I've learned this over the years, is you have to be diverse. And I'm talking diverse is really a cool term if you start thinking about diversity. But one situation, I inherited a company. I didn't inherit the dollars and cents, but I became the president of the company on about $10 or $12 million in sales. They did about $1 million a month. And 70% of that business was with one single client. Call it $6 million, $7 million with a single client. And at the end of my second month as the president of the company, that company decided to cancel the contract that they had. I got 120 days notice, and it represented about $6 million in sales. I spent the next 4 months trying to convince them, the company, that it was in everybody's best interest to keep that contract going. I took over the account from the salesperson themselves, just to attempt to save it. Was ultimately not able to do so, and saw the company through bankruptcy. Within 10 months of the time, we had overhead, we had staff. Again, I started on January 2nd. On April 1st, let 6 people go. Through natural attrition, August 1st came along and 6 more people left. We were down to a bare bones staff in October of 5 or 6 people, just keeping the organization afloat. So having diversity both in your product mix and your customer mix is something that in my world anyway, is really important. Your market, your product, and your customer base has to be diverse.
So it's like Grandma always taught us: don't put all your eggs in one basket, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or even 60% of them.
Yeah. At one organization I was with, 3 clients represented 60% of the business, and if you lost all 3 of those clients in 1 year, it'd be devastating. But just losing one, is
20% of business.
Yeah. You got to replace those clients.
Yeah, one of my early mentors when I was younger was working with the international company, and was doing great domestically, and I thought I was doing great. And he came up to me and he said, "Here, you need to focus on having your 10% of your income from 10 different countries." I said, "What?" Because you never know what the economy is going to do in one country over the other. And
Absolutely.
If all your eggs are in one country and the economy falls apart or suffers, that's 100% of your income. Sure. But if you have 10% and 1 or 2 countries go, at least you're still alive and in business and can pay your bills.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great
That's
advice.
good. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's important. And you went through it, and I know it wasn't easy. It was that's where you got all your gray hair, right? 'Cause that's where I got all mine.
Well, you know what? I tell people all the time, if you see an organization through those kinds of challenges, it's better than an MBA, because in an MBA situation, you've got a book smarts people that have given you these scenarios. What would you do if? Well, in these situations, it's what will you and are you doing in this situation? And it may be fluid today,
Yeah.
tomorrow, the next day. And when somebody actually is sitting alongside you in tears, going, "There's no reason that I should be fired, and it's not my fault," you've got the ability to be empathetic, to be personable. I wrote individual letters of recommendation for my entire staff, regardless of who they were or what they did, because it was the right thing to do. I could have bailed. And you talk about learning experiences. I could have gone back to the company that I had been with previously after 8 weeks and said, "Hey, I made a bad choice. They're in a bad situation. Turn tail and run." And I did the integral thing and have a letter of recommendation to prove that. And nobody can take that away, gray hair or not.
Yeah, no, you definitely became a stronger person by sticking it out. And that's a perfect example of being street smart over book smart. You're talking about that guy in the class getting the MBA. You put him in that scenario and he'll probably collapse and he'll bail because they didn't teach me this in the book.
It didn't exist. And again, something too, Harry, that I talk about all the time. And my board of directors and some of my board chamber members are a little bit, they're getting tired of me saying it, but there are so many books that you can lean on at these times. There's so many wise people out there that have written a chapter that's specific to the challenge that you have. You may not have to read the whole book, but
right.
that chapter or that section of a book has been significant in my life. I've been a lifelong learner and believe that much like going to a doctor who uses the 50s and 60s medical practice techniques, you wouldn't go to them. You'd wanted somebody that knew what open MRIs are all about and the latest technology. Well, my hope is that sales professionals, through organizations like yours and through tools that are available, look at sales as a profession and look at it as a progression. If I use the same techniques that I acquired in 1984 coming out of Illinois Wesleyan University today in the year 2021, heck, forget it.
You'd be left behind. Yeah. Technology is screaming right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and that really, you answered my last question for you, which would have been continuing education. And it sounds like you're a proponent of that as far as making sure you're not only your salespeople, but your managers are up to date on things like CRM and LinkedIn
Absolutely.
and technology. It's so important nowadays. And what we found is there's very little resources out there for sales managers. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you, is because that space, people need these resources. They need this information. They're hungry for it, and it's not really readily available out there. So I really appreciate you coming on. Would you like to share any last ideas or thoughts on best practices with our audience before we close it up?
I think one thing that comes to mind is that sales managers, if I'm talking to you directly and you're listening out there, don't do it the same way you've always done it. Oftentimes, sales managers get in the habit of hiring their competitors, and that may not be the best approach. Looking at somebody outside the box, outside your industry, people can learn new products. When I came into technology in 2003, 2004, I'd been in the printing business for 20 years. I mean, I knew printing and office products like the back of my hand, 20 years of doing it, but the printing industry was becoming a dinosaur. If somebody didn't give me an opportunity to learn a new product or think outside the box and look at me as an individual, I could have been pushing a broom someplace or doing something else and not doing what I was truly called to do, which was lead a business or lead a company. And I think that sales managers oftentimes go the safe route. And if they think that way, oftentimes they'll get passed over too. One last thing worthy of mentioning is that being consistent in your messaging to your staff, being consistent and being on point each and every day is really important. If your personality is wild one day and sorry, I exploded the next, that's not the type of leader that you want to be. You want to be consistent in your entire approach, and that takes a lot of hard work. It takes putting those things that are getting in your way personally or professionally aside when you're dealing with your staff. And I think that's what makes good managers. And if you're, as I said earlier, calling somebody into your office and saying you're fired, and there's been no communication up to that point, you're the one that's probably in need of training and development as much or more than the salesperson themselves.
And I'm so glad you brought that up to close with here, Dave, because that's what we want sales managers to hear, is this message that there can be some flexibility. They need to continually improve. And that's the title of our show, Continuous Improvement for Sales Managers. And they really need to. It's not like they have all the answers. Even if their boss thinks they do, even if they think they do, they don't. And so we'll close it up with that. And just want to thank you so much again for taking the time out of your busy day. I know it's crazy over there, and with all the things you got going on, playing baseball and softball at the same time, that's a great balance that you've created there. These tips you've given our audience today are priceless. I really appreciate that, and we'll get some feedback over to you as we get it in from our audience. Thank you again. For everybody else out there, thanks for joining in today. And don't forget, continuous sales improvement for sales managers, best practices. And also encourage you, if you'd like to hear some of our previous episodes, we have them in our website, Continuous Sales Improvement for Teams, continuoussalesimprovementforteams.com. Check it out. We'll be right back here next Tuesday. And you guys have a great day. Thanks again, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe to get notified of the latest episode. Also, to learn more about improving your sales team, visit continuoussalesimprovementforteams.com. See you in the next episode and have a great day.